Morning, everyone, again. Hi, Tracy. And today we're joined by Rachel Hore for our Books at Lunchtime event, which
Hello.
we're very excited about. So, good morning, Rachel.
Good
Um,
morning, Kett.
let's jump straight in. Tell us about your book, please.
Yes, the book I've just had published yesterday, the 18th, is A Beautiful Spy. And it's based on a true story. It's set in the 1930s, and it's about a woman called Minnie Gray, who's quite an ordinary young woman, a secretary, um, and she longs for some excitement in her life and rather unexpectedly finds it when she's invited to come and work for the Secret Service. And I follow her very intriguing story that takes us to the end of the 30s and then beyond, about what happens when she spies on members of the British Communist Party, who at that time were very, very closely connected to their Russian masters. And I'm very interested in a woman spy, because it was extremely unusual at that time. Her handler at MI5 was M, who is believed to be the model for James Bond. His real name was Maxwell Knight, and he was an extremely eccentric and very beguiling man with whom the real life Minnie, who was called Olga Gray, became very fascinated. And he actually really approved of women spies. He found that women were much better spies than a lot of other people at the time in MI5 thought, because they quite often had secretarial skills and they were useful, therefore, to place in offices, and would sit there quietly and unassumingly, and no one would actually suspect that they were collecting information. So Olga's life was not the sort of daring do of racing cars and fountain pens that turn into small daggers and that sort of thing, like in James Bond stories. But nor was she the kind of Mata Hari spy. She wasn't out there seducing men, gathering their secrets, and fortunately she did not end up in front of a firing squad like Mata Hari did in the First World War, when she was finally betrayed. But my Olga is, my Minnie rather, I keep interchanging the names, was an absolutely fascinating character, because of her sense of loyalty, her stamina, and the fact that she went on doing this dangerous, meticulous work, despite it having a terrible effect on the rest of her life and certainly her emotional life. She couldn't tell anybody about her spying work, and also that, you know, she was being asked to do things that were actually very, very dangerous, because if she had been exposed, then the the Russian communists would have had no would not have hesitated, if necessary, to bump her off. Um, so it's her inner life I'm as interested in as the actual work that she did. Um, and yeah, when I say that she is based on this real life spy, Olga Gray, um, I'll tell you how it came about that I wanted to write about her. I was originally thinking I would write a book that was set in the 1950s, and it was going to about this character who was hiding in Norfolk. What is she hiding from? And I was thinking, what would this woman have done in the past that she was now hiding from? and I started reading about female spies at the time and so on. And then when I came across Olga's story, I dropped my original idea and thought, I have to write about this woman. She's interesting as a possible fiction character because of her as a character. And I could really explore her inner life. And she also had the kind of life story that just lent itself to the structure of fiction, where you get a character who's under more and more pressure, and how they respond to that pressure, and you have a climax and a kind of epilogue to all this. And the story very quickly mapped itself out in my mind as the drama that a novel requires. And I tried as much as possible to make it true to life. But at the same time, when you're writing fictionally about a real life character, it feels quite intrusive, and sort of betraying someone's memory to, assume things about how they think and feel, and so forth. And I found it quite difficult, therefore, to get inside the real life Olga as a character until I gave her a fictional name, Minnie. And the fictional name also, I hope, conveys to the reader that this is above all a work of fiction. And so, it has to be read in this way. It was a joy to research this novel. I had access to documents from the National Archive, where there's quite a lot of material about MI5 in this period, and about the mysterious Em, and about Olga herself. Em wrote quite a long document all about Olga. And so that was incredibly useful. And then there are a number of secondary texts that I found about Olga. And it's interesting, is the slight inevitability of clashing facts, clashing details, clashing dates, that sort of thing. So I had to make my way through this. It wasn't very easy at first to find any surviving members of Olga's family. And I was a bit nervous anyway of trying to do so, because, how would you feel if some complete stranger wrote to you and said, I wish to write, a biography of a fictional life of your nearest and dearest. So actually, I didn't try and contact anyone until I was quite a long way through the book, and indeed had got the proofs, I think. So,
and what was the response when you did, Rachel?
Well, it was not terribly bothered or interested, actually. In some ways, I was quite pleased about this, but I think the real life Olga had actually, once she had done her job and stopped being a spy, it's a bit of a spoiler alert that she survives. She does. But I think she started a completely new life, and she didn't talk to her family about her spying life after that. So probably to them, she was, just kind of darling Olga. And it's all a bit of a surprise that quite recently there's been all this interest in her. I have felt, a strong ethical concern, I suppose, to try and be true to her memory. And since I feel very sympathetic towards her, and the whole book is written from her point of view, I think there's nothing in it that they would really object to. I haven't presented her as a horrible person or anything like that. I hope I've presented her as somebody who was very loyal and patriotic, but was just in rather a quandary through this period of her life as to how on earth she was going to survive and do her job properly and survive the loneliness, not being able to tell anybody, and
Well, this is something that really interests me about the whole theme of your book, Rachel, really. Is we've had so many decades now of men writing male spies.
Yeah.
But actually, it's quite interesting to take a different perspective, because I mean, you've alluded to that already about the different world that kind of female spy might have operated in.
Yeah.
But what perspective does that bring to the book and to the issue of spying anyway, if you look at it from a female point of view?
Well, I think particularly then, the roles of women and men in everyday life were just so different. A married woman, for instance, might say goodbye to her husband in the morning when he went out to work, and she might not actually know what he did all day. He might take his briefcase and disappear if he was a certain kind of middle class man. And his professional life was completely different from his home life, whereas I think a woman's life was expected to be much more transparent then, and she was supposed to focus on domestic issues, and if she was married, then she was less likely to have a job, and you can imagine that it would be extremely difficult to keep from your husband the fact that you had a double life. And also, I think it would complicate things so much emotionally for a wife that how could she keep it from her husband? Most women would feel a kind of integrity that they were kind of open to their husbands in such ways. So the whole business of having a relationship and getting married and having children when you are also a spy was a terrible quandary for her. And I won't spoil the story for people who haven't read it yet as to what happens during the course of her work. It's interesting that so much has been written now about female spies during the Second World War. In the early 2000s, suddenly all this evidence, paperwork was released from, the Secrecy Act, and an awful lot has now been written. And a lot of previously very quiet women have come forward and said, oh yes, I parachuted into France in 1943 and I did this and escaped with a knife in my teeth and all this sort of thing, which is much more obviously active form of spying that is in itself completely fascinating. But Olga is a different kind of spy, and it was and her bravery and her stamina were very different. Her whole situation was different, and so I think that also marks out my book from others that have been written. Funnily enough, I have written about an SOE female spy in A Gathering Storm. So and it felt very different writing this one.
It's different, isn't it, when your main protagonist is your female spy, as opposed to having female spies in books? Because I mean, you talked about the sort of the femme fatale type spying paradigm, and I mean, we see that all the time. All the twist is, the lovely girlfriend is actually, I mean, that's quite a common trope. But actually, to do it from your point of view is quite different. Is there more of an appetite for that then, do you think, now, having more of a, I'm just thinking more broadly across other books that are out there, do you think people kind of are welcoming a fresh perspective?
I have to say I hope so, but that's not
Yeah.
why that's not why I wrote it. I honestly wrote it because I was just gripped by this story of an ordinary woman doing extraordinary things, but not in the usual way that we think of spies. And it was a book I simply had to write. So I'm very much hoping that people do want something different. Yes.
The back of the book. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. If you were going to say something,
No,
Tracy,
it says. I mean, you've written so many books, haven't you?
The 11th. Yeah.
Is it only 11?
Unless there's someone pretending to be me somewhere.
But readers really do love your books, don't they?
I
And
hope so. Thank you.
Well, they do. And when you've been to our bookshop, and it's not far from where I'm sitting now, the fans who turned up, I would call them fans rather than readers who simply enjoyed the books. They're quite serious about your books, aren't they?
Yes. Well, I hope, because it's me writing, that they will like this one.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And the blurb says, so Wendy Holden says that the new book brilliantly contrasts the thrilling world of high stakes politics with the inner life of a passionate woman leading a dangerous double existence. And I've not read all 11 books, but I have dipped into several of them. And that does seem to be somewhat of the pattern, that there are passionate women who are quietly managing a double existence and what they want against the expectations of the world that they're in. And it may be like in Last Letter Home, which was 2 books ago.
Yes.
She was exploring the World War II history around the villa. There's always something else going on. They want more, don't they? They want to understand more.
The women do, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. But they are also women of their time.
Exactly.
They're not. They don't have a 21st century perspective.
Yeah.
So they're carrying out what they are expected to in some ways, but there's some sort of sand in the oyster, if you like, that
Yes.
that there's something about that they want to express about themselves.
Well, yes, exactly. Minnie in this is told that her how did you put it? Something about she's wearing dresses that show off her figure, so she made sure she did her corset up a bit tighter and put her lipstick on a bit brighter to make sure that she was of that time. But still, it's slightly rebellious, but within that time, isn't it?
Yes. That's good. That's a good point about her dress. Yeah.
Yeah, it made me giggle. So this is The Beautiful Spy, which is out yesterday.
Yep.
So congratulations on your publication day. The book before was The Love Child.
That's right, yes.
So because not everyone wants to have a paperback, and the hardback until it's their birthday or Christmas. Can you tell us about Beautiful Spy?
The Love Child.
Is that in paperback?
That is in paperback, yes. It was published back in last January, so a year ago. It's an adoption story. Adoption stories have been done before, of course, but I particularly wanted to explore the relationship between, from their points of view, between a birth mother who's had to give up her child and a child who's been adopted and is searching for their mother. And I wanted to set it at a time when adoption was not actually a legal thing. Adoption as a legal concept did not become law in the UK until the beginning of 1927. So before that, adoption agencies could hand out children, but birth mothers could actually ask for them back. There though there was often a financial penalty for so doing. But it enabled me to explore a lot of issues around adoption at that particular time. And the mother goes on to pursue a career and have her own life in full, and the child is given to a family from a different social class, and both of them are consciously looking for each other, but in those days you could not get any information from any adoption agency about what had happened to the other party. So it's only luck in the end that the daughter is able to get a few clues. But also, once you might think that happy ever after is the two coming together, but in reality it isn't. And I don't want to provide any spoilers about what then happens, but I go beyond anyway. That's kind of rather chocolatey ending.
I wouldn't expect a chocolatey ending. There might be lipsticks and corsets in your books, but they are actually quite realistic in terms of real life. So this is I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, because I know you're on a massive tour. I've been looking at your, virtual tour.
It's a virtual tour,
yes. It's a virtual tour, yes.
We so take what we can get at the moment, yes. Don't we?
Yes, I know. It involves a lot of retweeting and thanking people online and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's amazing actually what all these book bloggers do on Twitter and Instagram. They review books and they write articles and they have their own websites and so on, and then so this tour has all been organized, well, a tour on Instagram and a tour on Twitter, but I haven't actually had to do the work and the putting together. That's been up to my publisher.
That's convenient.
But instead of putting adverts on the side of buses or whatever these days, that's what happens. And there's a whole world of people who read and talk about books on these social media platforms, and they do command. They are influencers. They do command.
So speaking of influencing, then, if someone has read all of your books and enjoyed them, what would you recommend that they move on to next if they're just desperate for another good read?
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed recently another book that was published yesterday, which is called The Other Daughter by Caroline Bishop. And I think it's in paperback, but I'm not totally sure because I was given a proof of it. And it's another dual narrative story of a mother and a daughter. But the subject of it is it's partly set in Switzerland, and the original story is based around Swiss feminism. Switzerland was about one of the last countries in Europe to allow women the vote, and that wasn't until 1972. And so the mother is caught up in a story set in Switzerland about their brand of feminism, and the character in the present is her daughter is I think she's a journalist, and is looking to connect with her mother's story anyway. But I found it a really well constructed book, and just fascinating about the feminist background as well. So there's that one. I've recently read Anne Patchett's Velcanto, which has been out for a little bit, and it's set in South America, and it's about a hostage taking situation in which a world famous singer is caught up amongst the hostages, and it's just a beautifully evoked book, and with a really tense story. It's not sort of shooting and thriller-like. It's almost dreamlike in some ways.
So this is the same Anne Patchett who wrote The Dutch House, which so many of our readers have been enjoying.
To say is,
yeah, which is
Dutch House as well, and love that. Yeah.
So it's that not a lot happens, but there's an awful lot of tension. I think would probably transfer across. So our readers have enjoyed The Dutch House, so they'd enjoy Velcanto.
They really would. Yes. That Velcanto won the Women's Prize for Fiction. And thirdly, now for something completely different, Helen MacDonald, who wrote H is for Hawk.
Yes, I love this book.
Oh, good. Yes, well, I do too. And it's actually a book of essays about the natural world. And the thing about essays and short stories, especially at this time of lockdown, is you can just read one before bed, and they're kind of bite size, absolutely beautifully written, and you learn things particularly about the life of birds, which you would never in a million years guess or have known before.
I thought lockdown was very unfair for this book because it didn't get the attention it deserved. I absolutely loved that book, and I wish that everyone would discover it.
Yeah. It's in some ways, she's always aware of what is happening to the natural world at the moment, and yet it is incredibly uplifting and inspiring, isn't it?
Yes.
I
haven't met her. I'm sure you have.
No, I haven't. No,
really?
I really love to meet her, but she seems so. The essays themselves are not erudite, but I think she must be quite an erudite person. She and wonderful command of language. So I think anybody who's read H is for Hawk, or who likes Robert Macfarlane's books, would love them. But I think we just need little bits of things at the moment to keep us going. And so, as I say, it could be perfect for, just a brief period of concentration on something that is quite uplifting. I mean, it's much better than listening to the 10 o'clock news, I can tell you.
Yes, absolutely right. Well, we will continue to keep track of what you're writing, because I assume you have very many more books in you.
I am 75,000 words through one for the next one. It's very rough draft at the moment, but I am keeping on.
Is it a period spy thriller with a female protagonist?
No, it's set in Norfolk. One of the problems that writers are facing at the moment is they can't go anywhere to research. So it's got a French strand, because I know a bit about France already, without having to go out there with my explorer helmet and my knee socks to research it at the moment. So I'm quite happily tapping away on that one.
Excellent. That's really exciting, Rachel. We look forward to chatting to you about that when it hits the bookshelves. Will that be next year? Do you write? Is it an annual sort of thing, or is it less formal than that?
No, it's not quite annual. I don't write fast enough, unfortunately. So I think that'll probably come out at the beginning of, sometime in 2022. My goodness, but yeah, it will depend on when I finish it. So very, very exciting about the Kett's shortlisting for regional bookshop.
Wow, thank you very much. We're excited too.
Yeah, good work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's the shortlisted for the
Nibbies,
which is the Independent Bookshop of the Year.
Yeah.
So the news came out yesterday. So we'll keep our fingers crossed about that. You are our friend and neighbour. You're only just up the road. So
yes.
We look forward to seeing lots more of you when we're able to.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really lovely seeing you again.
It's a pleasure. The paperback is published in September. So, if I can do anything for you about then,
That would be great. And that's just in time for Christmas, isn't it, for stocking filler?
Yes,
Mm.
that's right.
Yeah. Gosh, we're talking about Christmas. It's only
Well,
February.
I wish all listeners here my very best wishes, and you know, books are such a boon at times like this. You can lose yourself in a book.
Absolutely
All
right.
different sorts as well. So yeah, it's wonderful to sort of spread your literary wings and just try some things that maybe you haven't pulled off the bookshelf before.
Yes.
So
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Right. Thank you again, Rachel.
Thank you, Tracy and Em.
Thank you.
Okay.